Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I would like to show you how to create a REST API for URL shortener project which is beginner friendly. We are using Node.js, Express framework and MongoDB Atlas which is a cloud database. I will show you the step-by-step implementation of CRUD functionalities. So let's jump into the demo. I will be using Postman for making HTTP request. So here you can observe I have a collection of all the endpoints. So currently in the database I have no records. So let's try to fetch all the URLs. So this is a GET request. So let's make a request now. So you can see I have received an empty array, so no records. So let's try to create a URL. So this is a post request and this is the endpoint. In the body we have to provide a JSON object request body. So we have to choose raw JSON format. So we have to pass original URL. So this is a long form which you want to convert into short form. So this is a long URL. So let's make a request now. Okay, now we have received this response 201 created from our server. So MongoDB has written this object, document object. So you can observe these are the properties will contain inside document. So original URL and short URL which is a short code, and this contains other properties. Okay, so let's try to make a single GET request to fetch this document. So we have to provide this short code in the URL. So let's try to make a GET request now. So this will return the object, document object. Okay, so now we can verify the redirection. So by providing the short code, this should redirect to the long form. So let's test this inside a browser. So I'm making this request in the browser. So let's see. Okay, so now it's redirecting to MongoDB website. So you can see in the MongoDB, so we have a database called URL shortener, and this is the collection, and inside it we have a document, a single document which we created right now. So let's make a GET request to fetch all the URLs. So let's try to update this long URL. So we can make use of this short code, and in the URL you can pass this, and then in the request body, so we can update the long URL. So I'm updating to this. So now make a request. Okay, so again, so this was updated. So if you get this document again, so this is previous response, right? So let's send request again. So this was updated again. So let's try to delete the URL. So again you have to pass the short code and make a request. Okay, so 200 response, and this is the returned response. Okay, so now if you try to fetch all the URLs, so you should get empty response. Okay, now if you try to get the single to get a URL by passing the short code, this should give not found. So this is the CRUD functionalities that we will be implementing. So let's jump into the code. Okay, so before starting with the code, let's quickly look at what are the prerequisites for this project. So the basic knowledge of JavaScript and Node.js will help you to better understand familiarity with the RESTful API. So if you know things like HTTP methods like get, put, patch, and delete, these are the CRUD operations that we will make, right? So HTTP responses like status codes like 400, 200, 500, all these things will help you to better understand. And so we will be making CRUD operations. This is fine. Experience with NoSQL databases. So in this case MongoDB. So if you know these things, it will be helpful for you. So these are not mandatory. So let's try to learn by doing the project. Let's look at the tools we will need. So Node.js. So if you go to this website, you can download the latest version of Node.js, and MongoDB Atlas, which is a cloud database fully managed by MongoDB in the cloud, and you can sign up for free, and we can make use of it. And for the code editor, I will be using Visual Studio Code. You can use your choice. So the first step is we have to set up our project. Okay, so we have to start with creating a directory. So in Visual Studio Code, I have already created a folder and opened this. We have to initialize Node.js project using this command. So this will create package.json file. For every Node.js project, you have to do this as a first step. Passing -y, opt for default options. Otherwise, it will prompt for you to answer. So the next thing is we have to install the project dependencies. So I will be using Express for web server. So Express is a framework of Node.js. So next is Mongoose. This is an object data model. So we will make use of it to interact with MongoDB database, and a .env package for managing the environment variables. So let's install this. So this will take couple of minutes. Okay, now you can see the installation is completed, and in the dependencies section you can see these are the libraries that we will be using. And I will also install nodemon as a dev dependency because I want nodemon to watch my changes. So this will restart the server without manual intervention. So npm install -d for dev dependency nodemon. So the next thing is we have to update the npm scripts in the package.json. So this is the package.json and we have a scripts object, right? So here, so you can use the start command. So this usually in the production you run node with the file, right? So in this case I would like to use server.js as the starting file, and I will also update here server.js instead of index file. It's just a naming convention. You can follow index as well. And next thing is so in the dev I would like to use nodemon, right? So I don't want to use the node command every time. So nodemon server.js. So every time I will run npm run dev, this will restart server.js. Okay, next thing is so we have to update the type module. We can use this command. So common.js and module. So previously in the old syntax, like common.js is the old pattern, so requiring importing things. Let's choose this module syntax. So this is similar to you if you use a React. So import statements are familiar to you. So setting up the project is done. So let's continue with setting up the MongoDB Atlas. So we have to sign up for a MongoDB account, and then we have to create a cluster, followed by you have to set up the database and collection for our project. So once the database is created, so we can get our connection string. So using this connection string from our node backend, we will interact with the MongoDB in the cloud. So I have already created an account, and usually when you sign up, so this will ask you to create an organization in the beginning. So this is the organizations tab. You can create an organization by providing the name, and you can choose the MongoDB Atlas, and you can click on next. So this will ask you to add members. So by default, you can be the owner. So I have already created the organization. So I will make use of this test org. Okay. So inside this organization, you have to create a project again. So again, you can provide the organization and click next. So let's make use of this existing one. Okay, so go ahead and follow the approach for cluster creation. So it is a straightforward. So I have already created a cluster, so I will make use of it. You can see this is the overview page inside project. So we can click on the collections tab. This is the single database I have right now. Let's create a database. So this is the database name I would like to use, and collections name URLs plural. Let's create. Okay, so we have a database with collections with 0 documents. Okay, so we can go to overview page again, and if you click on this connect button, you can see it is asking to add IP address. Either you can add your current IP address or allow access from anywhere. So you can see anyone in the public via internet can access this. This is not safe. Usually you have to provide your server IP address in order to interact with the cloud database. So for the demo purpose, I'm going with this. choose a connection method. Here you can see how do you want to connect your application. So there are many ways, like you can use tools like Compass, shell commands, or the other ways to talk to your database. But in our case, we are using backend Node.js application, right? So choose this. Okay, so we don't use the MongoDB driver, but we need this connections. Let's copy this. So in the project root directory, let's create server.js file first of all. This is a basic thing, right? And next thing is we have to create .env file. So inside this, I will create two variables. One is a port 5000 variable, and other one is a Mongo URI. Copy this, paste here. So here you have to replace your password. So I'm providing my password, and before the question mark, you have to provide the database name. So this is fine. Let's start with creating our Express server. So we have already created a file, right? Server.js. So let's try to set up the Express server. So let's start importing the Express from Express. So we will also make use of .env. Okay, so using this .env, you have to call this config method. So this will attach the environment variables to process.env object. Therefore, we can read the environment variables without any issues. Okay, so let's create the Express app. Create a variable called app, and using this Express, let's call this. Okay, so this will return an object. Okay, so let's create a variable called port. Process.env.put. If this is not available, then I'm giving an alternate solution to use. Next thing is we have to register some middlewares. We can use app.use, and we can pass middleware functions. So why we need to pass this express.json is so whenever we make a request to our Express server, it has to parse the incoming request body from client. So that's the reason we have to pass it. Otherwise, it won't parse the data, which will give you undefined. So that is not expected. So we have to parse it. Okay. So next thing is start the server. So I will create a function start server. So this is an arrow function. So here I will use a try catch block whenever I have any error. So let's log error right now. So I will implement error handling. For now, let's use a console error. Okay, so here we have to connect to database, which I will implement in a moment. Once database connection is done, then we are good to start and listen to our server for the request. We can make use of app.listen. So this will take the port number, and this will provide a callback function. So I would like to log using the backticks. So server started listening on port, and you can use template literals for using the variable. So just creating the function is not enough. So we have to call it start server. So in the console, so for now we can check npm run dev. So this will run the script command. So in the package.json, so we have provided the dev command, right? So this will start nodemon server.js. Okay, so server started listening on port 5000. Okay, I will create folders. So for example, config folder, and followed by models. So we will store MongoDB models inside this folder for routes, and another folder for controllers, another folder for middleware or any custom middlewares. So these are the folders we will use. So inside config, I would like to create a file called db.js. Let's import Mongoose. We have to set property called a strict query. So we have to use this. Otherwise, MongoDB will throw warning error. Let's provide this information. Okay, so let's create a function for our connection. So connect DB. So this is an async function. Again, let's use the try catch block. So let's log the error here and exit whenever there is database connection issue. Then we should stop. Here, let's create a variable called connection. We have to call mongoose.connect method. So this is a asynchronous method. That's why we are awaiting for this to complete. Here we can pass the environment variable. So we are using Mongo URI, which contains the connection string. So we have to pass it. Okay, so let's log MongoDB connected. So for this connection, we have a connect object which contains host. So let's save this. So we created a function. So we have to export connect method. Okay, so in the server.js, so you can see we have imported this connectdb method. Okay, so one thing you have to remember is you have to provide explicitly .js, otherwise it will give error. So this is the import syntax of using the es module syntax. Let's say take this connectdb and here all this method. So in the console you can observe we are starting server and okay, MongoDB undefined. This is not connect, this is the connection. So now you can see the host name is console logged. Okay, so let us continue. So the next step is we have to define the schema and model for our database. So in order to interact with the database, we have to create models. So create a file called url.js and for defining the schema and model. Okay. So inside models folder, let's create a file called url.model.js. So this is the naming convention I'm following. It's not required or mandatory. You can follow your approach. Inside, let's import Mongoose. Let's create a schema. So how this should look like. Mongoose has a schema method. So this will take some information. What are the properties that our object should contain? We are storing original URL, which is a long URL, right? Will be of type string. So S capital. This is required. So next thing is so we have to store our short generated code. So I'm naming it as short URL. So this is again same by true, and this should be unique because we should not store duplicate short codes which will conflict. Okay, so finally we have to pass another object. This is timestamps, because once an object is created, this will defaultly give created at and updated timestamps. So this is our schema. So let's create a variable URL model. Using Mongoose, we have a method called model. You have to name it, give a single name, so do not give plural name. So this will automatically plural in the database. So the collection name will be URLs. This takes the URL schema. So let's export default. So this is how we will create schema and model. Okay, so next thing is we have to set up our routes. We have already created a folder called routes, right? Inside it, so let's create routes.js. And then once routes are created, so we have to connect back inside server.js. So we have to wire up our routes. So let's create this file url.routes.js file. Put express from. So let's create a variable called router. So using this express, we can call router method before setting up any routes. So let's put default the router object. So now I want to connect this router in server.js file. So import URL routes from routes.js. So now we have to register our routes to Express server. Backend API route starts with API slash. So for this resource, so I'm using URLs. Any request that contains API slash URLs, these routes will be handled by our URL route. So let's start with registering the route. You can use this router object and handle. So I will use create endpoint, and this will take a logic handler which will interact with the database, so which is like a business logic. So what we need, we have to create controllers. So we already did that. So we have to create a file, this one. So we have to export the functions and connect with routes. Okay, so inside controllers, let's create a file, this one. Okay, so let's start creating with create function. So create short URL. So this will be async function. Okay, so this takes few parameters. First response. So let's have a try catch block. So for the time being, let's log. So whenever there is an error, so let's say response.status. So we will send 500 status code with response of kernel server. So from the request body, we have to accept original URL, right? So request body contains this property. So I'm destructuring it. If this is not existed, there is no original URL passed from the client, then I would like to return a response of bad request. 400 means bad request. URL is required. whenever we create a new URL, we have to check if that already existed in database. So let's create a variable. So we have to await because it is a asynchronous operation. Okay, so now we have to make use of the model we created. It was imported here, you can observe, and make sure to provide .js file. Okay, we don't use find by id because we have a clear property, right? So using this original URL, so we have to find. If you this returns an object, that means URL is already existed, so we cannot create a duplicate or something. Let's return add request, so 400 and response already short. If we pass this condition, that means we are good to go. So let's create a variable to store the new URL object. Wait for synchronous operation. Mongoose will return a promise, so that's why we are awaiting. So here we can make use of a method called create. This takes an object. We have a original URL information from the client. So there is one more thing. So we have to generate short URL, right? So short URL here I'm using simple algorithm generating a random string, but you can use your choice. You can implement your own algorithms in order to generate random string for the short code. Okay, so once this random string is generated, so this will return a substring at this location. This short URL have to pass to MongoDB. So here I'm not defining key value pairs like this because both are same. So the key is short URL and value is present inside this variable, right? So that's the reason. So we don't need to. This will create a document, and once this is created, we can return a response with the status of 201 means created, and a JSON response. And our new URL object. Once this function is created, so we have to export this inside this object. Let's pass this. Okay, so in the routes file, so here whenever we receive a request to this endpoint, a post request, so this function will handle that. So create short URL function from the controllers. So don't forget to import with an extension .js. Since this is completed, so let's verify in the Postman. I will create a new collection. urlshortener demo. Add a request. Create URL. So this should be post request. So this is the API endpoint. So in the body section, select raw method with JSON response. And here you are supposed to pass a JSON response. We have to provide this original URL. In this case, I want to convert this. So you can see this is a long URL, right? So we have no records in the database as of now. So I will copy this, pass this as a value. For example, if you don't send any request body and make a request, so you can see 400 bad request is coming, original URL is required. So this is the validation, input validation we are performing. If you pass this JSON response body request body, so let's send a request. Okay, so we received a 201 created from our server, and MongoDB has returned this response. So if we verify in the database and refresh it, so this has created. So we have a short code of 4495. Okay, so let's implement other routes. So let's define route router.get. So whenever we receive a get request to slash, so this should handle a function. So let's create a function get URLs. So async function will take request response. Next, let's open try catch block. Previously in catch block we are logging this. Inside try block, store this URLs fetched from database inside a variable. So await. So we have the model available right inside here. So we can use this find method and pass an empty object. So this returns all the documents available in the collection. So let's return response and a JSON response. So now we have to code this function in order to use it. So inside routes here we have to pass it. Since we have already imported this file, so it's just putting. So let's add one more request. all URLs. So this is a simple GET request, those API URLs and a GET request. Now it returns array of objects. So we have only one document. Now let's try to implement fetching a specific URL by using the short code we have outer.get. So how do you fetch a specific URL? We are generating the short URL, right? So here we can pass a dynamic parameter, which is a short URL. So again, we need a function to handle this. We can fetch this ID inside our function and then talk to the database. So let's define the method get URL missing function first response and next. So try catch block. So inside catch, let's use this same. So we have to take input from the route params. Okay, so how do you collect route params? So request has a object called params. So this contains that dynamic route param we are passing like this and destructure like this. So if we don't have a short URL passed in the route, so we should say so it is required. Create a variable to store the response from MongoDB using the model. So let's find one using this short URL. So we are using this filter condition in order to fetch the document. So whichever is matching, MongoDB will return that particular document. So if you don't get any document matching, then we should return this is not found, right? Provide a JSON response, URL not found. But if you get the response, so that means we are good. We can say 200 response and pass a JSON response with URL. So again here you can pass an object success true and then URL, something like this. So this is fine. Let's you export this function. Here we have to put it. So let's create one more request. So as I said, like we have to pass this short URL code in the previous request. So we have received this, right? So this is again a get request. So you can observe we have received an object. Okay, so this is fine. So let's work on the redirection. So let's go to routes, try to implement that. So when we make a request using a short URL, so we need to navigate or redirect. So using router again, this will be again a get request, but the naming should be different. So we have to say redirect slash and then dot URL. Okay, so we have to implement another function. So if you use the same, then it will have a collision and it will always be handled with this one. So that's the reason I have added this and followed by the short URL. So let's implement the function. So again async function. So we will use the same and inside here we have to receive that dot URL from the route params, right? So using request dot params, so we can destructure that. So if don't receive it, then we have to find this. If we don't find it, then should throw error. So MongoDB has to search with this short URL. If this is not found, should return this. So here I forgot to mention return, otherwise execution will continue. Once we have the data, so here we are supposed to redirect, right? So response.status, so 301 meant for redirection status code, and here we can call redirect method. We have this URL object, right, which contains original URL, right? So this is what we stored inside MongoDB. So this MongoDB document contains the original URL, so we are passing to this redirect method. So this will ensure that whenever we make request to route, so this function will redirect the user to the original URL. Okay, so let's export this. And to this request, so we have to pass this request handler, import this. Okay, so MongoDB started. We can make use of the same in the browser because we want to see the redirection. So let me pass here and make a request. Oh, okay. This is not the right URL. I have to say here direct. slash short URL. Now you can see redirecting. So let's try to work on this. So we have to use a put method here, slash short URL. We have to define our function, update URL. So we have to receive short URL, right? Because in the request we are passing the short URL. So from the route params, first of all receive that short URL. And when we are updating, so in the request body also we have to pass original URL. So again from request body, so I'm taking user provided long URL. So again I'm naming it as original URL. So if there is no short URL, or so we have to say short URL in route params and original URL in the request body is required. So let's have a try catch block. Let's a variable called URL. So here we have to await, and using the model we can call method find one and update. So here we can pass, so with the help of dot URL, so we can find one, and so to this we have to pass another object, so which we want to set. So in this case original URL, and another object is, if you pass this option then only you will get updated object as a response. So if the URL we are not able to update, then so we should say URL not found to update. Else case we are good to status of 200 updated and with the updated URL object. Okay, so let's put, so in the routes pass this. Okay, let's try this in Postman. So let's add a request, update URL. This should be put request, and so we pass this code, the route params, and the body, sure that we have to pass this original URL. Okay, so initially when we are creating, so we have used this long, and here I would like to remove all this. So I'm updating the existing long URL. Let's make a request. Now you can see we have received a 200 response and updated object is document is returned. And now if you try to get all, so previously we have this long form, so now a request was updated to return updated one. So put was also working fine. So finally let's work on the deletion part. So here we have to use a method called delete, http method delete. So again we need a id, right, in order to delete the short URL, and then this needs a function to handle it. So let's go to the controller, find the method here, tracing function. So we have to destructure it in the same logic here. We don't need the dot URL required in order to delete. So let's open the try catch block. So let's create a variable called deleted URL. We have to use a MongoDB method to delete, find one and delete. This will take the short URL. Why I'm storing this response? So find one and delete method usually finds it. If it finds, then it will delete and return the response back. So that's why let's store this and return. For confirmation, if we receive delete URL, that means delete. So if we don't receive it, then again the provided URL is not right one. Provide here URL not found to delete. Otherwise we are good to send this back to client to let them know that request was successful, deleted URL. So I named it similar to the function name, so make sure you name it properly for the instances. Okay, so deleted and delete, so difference with a single letter. Let's export this method. Okay, so the method has been imported. So let's verify in the Postman. Let's add a request again. again you need to pass this the route, and the method should be delete method. So we don't need to pass any body, just a short URL in the route is required. So send a request. Okay, 200. Okay, so now if you try to fetch this get now, so URL not found. So this is we are handling 404 not found. So when we try to fetch all the URLs, so this should give empty again. Actually empty object is giving us an issue. Even without empty object also you will be able to fetch list of documents from the collection. So I think we have implemented all these CRUD functionalities, creating the short URL from the long URL, fetching list of URLs, fetching a single URL, and redirection, updation, and deletion. Okay, so finally we are left with error handler. So let's continue with our process. So previously, so we implemented this error handling, so we have to implement to manage any unexpected issues. So as of now, we in the code we are handling with just with return response thing, so we can handle it in a better way. So in the middleways, let's create a file called error.js, create a function error handler. So this receives error request response and next parameter. First of all, we need a status code. From the response, are we sending the status code? So let's verify this. If it is 200, so in the error case we should never throw 200, so it should be meaningful. If it is 200 you are receiving in the error case, then we made it to 500 internal server error, else it is fine. So we can leave it like this. And the message from the error object, we can get the message here. We can simply run response.status code and followed by JSON response. So here I would like to message equal to message variable. So when both are same, we can leave it. So even you can say you can provide your custom responses as per your requirement. So now let's export this. Okay, so we have to register this inside server.js file. So this is called a default export. It's not named export. If you observe in the routes file, we are importing inside object. This is called named exports, and in server.js this is called default export. Okay, so we have received this import. So after all the routes and before starting the server, so app.use, and you have to pass this reference function reference. This will execute the function. We don't want that. Why we are keeping at the last? Because so inside controller functions, next is used to call the next available middleware. So inside the controllers, so this function is the last, and if you register the error handler, then this becomes the last middleware. App.use, so using this function we always register our middlewares. So in the controller, so let's start by updating them. How do you call this error handler? So whenever you encounter any issue, so instead of returning like this, I will paste this. So you can see I'm updating response.status with a 400 status code. So I'm calling the next function and passing the error object with my custom message. Here I'm passing original is required. This error message will interpret inside here. This error.message contains whatever you are passing in this error object. Okay, so in this way you can call whenever you have error, you can simply call the next function to call the error middleware. Okay, so I'm updating everywhere. So here I will leave the console as it is, but here instead of this internal server error, I will say status 500 and calling with the error message. So this can be any error apart from the errors we are handling. Okay, so in all the places, like date catch block with Okay, so let's create other place. So we are good with creation. We do not have any errors inside fetching all URLs. So whenever we get 104 thing, here we have one error. Setting the status, returning and calling the here also. So everywhere is updated except this. Okay, so done. So previously when we try to fetch a URL that doesn't exist, so we got this simple message, right? String message 104. So let's try to send request now. Now you can see a better object response. Additional features that we can consider is validating user inputs and security. Like maybe you can enhance this project by adding authentication and testing. Here you can see we tested our operations using Postman. Maybe you can implement an automation pipelines or frameworks. That's all about the video. I would like to thank you for joining in this project. I hope you learned something, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. I know your likes help our community grow, and don't forget to subscribe and give a like. So keep coding, keep learning, and the next week. Till then, take care. Bye.